Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our third Crucial Conversations. I am Dr. Denise Taliaferro Brazil, and I am a Associate Dean in the College of Education, Health, and Society, and I am also a professor in the Department of Educational Leadership, and my work focuses on the relationship between race, gender, knowledge, and power. And I am joined this evening by Dr. Rodney Coates, who is a sociologist, and he is also leading our critical race and ethnic studies program here on campus. I am excited to have the opportunity to chat with Dr. Coates today about white supremacy, what it is, what it's not, how it moves and operates, why it's bad for all of us, and what are some things we can start to do right now today to turn this ship around and move in a direction that invests in more equity for more equity, more justice for more people. And so I want to start the conversation with talking about what white supremacy is. And I think it's important to start here because in my experience, when we initiate these conversations, oftentimes we are having drastically different understandings of what we're talking about and what's at stake. You know, in my experience, especially with people outside of academia, the conversation, when you use the word white supremacy, people usually think, they think about the Ku Klux Klan and Nazis or, you know, other sort of white supremacist organizations. And that's a little bit different than the way we talk and think about it in academia as a logic and as a system, as embedded institutionally, as well as you know, impacting our everyday. So in my field, I think about it as a logic, that disciplines us to value whiteness over all other differences, but particularly Blackness. And this, you know, even in academia, we see this thing from different lenses. It has different angles. And so that's why I'm happy to have Dr. Coates here this evening. And so I'm going to throw this first question out to him and ask him to talk about white supremacy from his perspective as a sociologist.
Push back on the term, first of all, white supremacy. I like several other terms like white arrogance, white imperialism, toxic whiteness, white fragility, white systems and white structures and white behavior and white norms. When we think of this thing called supremacy, it is a whole matrix that involves all of these things, okay? And I would say, lastly, that there's just a presumption of superiority, all right? And this is what's tied into this notion of white fragility and also white arrogance, okay? This concept has a historical moment when it came into being, and it's tied to European imperialism and it's arrogance to believe that they were white man's burden. They had a right to enslave, to rape, to maim, to kill Native Americans and Africans and other indigenous populations from China to India to Africa. And this is a global process that we're talking about, not just within the US, okay? And it goes back to 1492.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the history of white supremacy and the emergence of, or the matrix of whiteness as it becomes sort of doctrine and practice in the U.S. in particular, and then it's, you know, fanning out. Be really definitely a global, you know, it is definitely a global phenomenon. So let's talk a little bit about that history, because I feel like people that I, as a curriculum person, that's kind of where
Mhm.
I gravitate toward, because I think of curriculum as the stories we tell our children about who we want them to believe that we were and who we are, and ultimately who we want them to be. And when that story isn't clear, then we're not clear. So let's talk a little bit about the history and how it emerges in the U.S.
Let's start off with two myths. One, 1492, Columbus sailed the blue and discovered America. Let's talk about another myth. You know, that one says Thanksgiving, where the pilgrims are sitting in their homes and the Native Americans bring these meals to, you know, to feed them, so forth and so on. These two myths, okay, and they are myths, okay, it did not happen that way, okay. 1492, Columbus was hopelessly lost. Columbus was on his way trying to find a shortcut, okay, to India, all right. He was so far off, it's not funny. All right. If anybody looks at the globe and say, okay, India is over here and the Americas is over here. All right. So hopelessly lost, he approaches a group of Arawak or Arawakians, okay, and which translates to the people. Okay. All right. He meets the people. Okay. And he says, well, are you Indians? They said, no, we are Arawak. We are the people. Okay. Christopher describes them as essentially the noble savage. Okay, another myth. Okay, he describes them as being peaceful and loving and rendering him all kinds of aid and assistance. Okay, Christopher goes back to Spain. Queen Isabella, all right, and Ferdinand says, "Hey, what did you bring us back? We sent you to find this short trade route. All right. We got a lot of money invested in you. What did you find? I found this new land. Okay. So what? What's there?" Christopher comes back, by the way, with 1,200 men, 5 or 6 more ships. Okay, and he begins enslaving and brutalizing these noble savages that were so kind and open to him a little bit before. Okay, and he drags them back, thousands of them, back to England. Okay, along with those, by the way, that were able to provide him with gold. All right, beaks full of gold. All right, he brought he ransomed them off. All right, so he comes back with a couple of thousand Native American slaves and trunks full of gold. All right, all of a sudden we discovered a new land filled with savages. Okay, and gold. All right, and we take God, gold, and glory and define these people as savages. By the way, heathens, less than human. Okay. All right. The pilgrims, by the time we flip to the next myth, all right, 100+ years have passed. All right. And by the way, the Spanish colonies, the French colonies, all right, that have already started importing Black people because Native Americans kept fighting and running away, all right? And we use religion, God, to say, look, another group of heathens, okay, all right? So you've got white and you've got heathens. Oh, by the way, the first group of heathens that we imported into this country were the Irish. Okay, they were less than also human, and they were savages too. All right. In the process, we said, you know what? When they escaped, they looked just like us. All right. Plus, the white savages were doing some strange things with the Black and the Indian savages. They were banding together and fighting against the white elite. Okay. All right. And then guess what happens? All of a sudden, the white elite realized that they're outnumbered. So they came up with this interesting concept called whiteness, okay, and told the lesser group of Europeans, you are white, okay, and as a white person, you are a human, and these other people of color are savages, all right? And we created this third myth called white supremacy.
Yeah. And what I really sort of appreciate about hearing the story too is that the power of the fact that it is a story, right? It's a story that we've sort of fabricated and engineered to do certain kinds of work for us. And I think sometimes we get hung up on the fact that we sort of have taken all of the racist language out of the law. We have tried to make things sound neutral and objective, and yet the story looms, and the story itself is fundamentally not just representing racial identities, it is creating, producing, and reproducing the identities themselves. So it's always interesting to me, because I think a lot of times, because this always feels like such a crisis, I think particularly for Black people, because with people dying in the streets, with children not getting equitable education, and all the other things that sort of define the afterlife, that it's always feeling like a crisis for us. And so we want to get on the ground and get busy. And I always say that we also have to be thinking about the discursive violence that is undergirding and underwriting the actual violence. And because if we don't deal with both of those things, then it will continue to recreate itself.
Well, when you, on the one hand, you have these myths that are being taught continuously in grade school. I'm sorry, Columbus myth is still being taught. Okay. I'm sorry, the Thanksgiving thing, we celebrate that every year. So we reify these myths, of these noble Europeans coming here in search of freedom, who are set upon by these savages, all right? We also maintain the illusion of innocence, on the part of all of these other people that are part of this myth making, and not challenging the fact that, wait a minute, so out of the blue, Native Americans decide to start killing white folks, with no apparent reason, Out of the blue, thousands of Native Americans are being killed. You got 10 million Native Americans at one point, and now you're down to something like 2.1. The greatest genocide in the history of humanity took place. And by the way, we did not kill them nobly. It was European germs. All right, things like smallpox. We handed Native Americans smallpox infected blankets, the U.S. Army. Knowing they were smallpox infected, for what purpose? To exterminate this group of people. By the way, this is the first act of germ warfare in the history of the world, and we're part of. Oh, here's one more. Let's talk about most recently, World War II, all right. Hitler was so fascinated with American racism and Jim Crow, all right, that he started studying American practices of racism, all right, and he made a comment, all right, Jim Crow and his laws were his Bible, all right, but his folks were saying this is too harsh. We can't go this far, all right, and Hitler said, why not? He said they killed thousands of Africans in this thing called lynching, and you know what? They take pictures of them. You can go online and see people going to a party, all right, all dressed up, suit, tie, so forth. So little kids, in party dresses at a lynching, at a lynching where 10,000 people in Waco, Texas show up, all right? 10,000, all right, and Hitler said, wow, I wonder, can we do that, all right, all right, and took a page from this. So when we talk about white supremacy, we need to talk about white terrorism, Okay, which, by the way, the Homeland Security just ruled that white supremacist organizations are homeland terrorist groups. Okay, all right, we've got a bunch of these terrorists. Mm-hmm. Okay, last thing, isn't it strange that with thousands of lynchings, and by the way, this is after slavery, after slavery. Okay, we're going to come back and talk about why the lynchings. Okay, that's another interesting thing. Okay, it has to do with white fragility. Okay, all right, but here you have these thousands, and you got photos. All right, and you know what's interesting? Like Emmett Till, the FBI just in the last couple of weeks finally closed the case on Emmett Till. Okay, 55 years after the fact, and guess what? The woman who claims that Emmett Till had sexually abused her, okay, says she lied.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. She lied. She admitted she lied. We know 2 of the 3 men who committed the crime. Yet, 55 years later, no charges, no convictions, so forth and so on. And people wonder why people are saying Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And by the way, this is not the first time we've made this appeal. We've shouted this from the belfries, okay? This goes back 400-500 years where Blacks were saying Black Lives Matter. This is not just occurring. Right. And by the way, Native American lives matter. And yes, Hispanic lives matter, okay? All right. But yes, and Asian lives matter. There's a reason why Chinatowns exist. Okay, right. So it's not just Black, it's every other group, okay, that also has been victimized and terrorized, all right, in this thing called whiteness.
Yeah, and I think that would include, I would also argue, but that we're victimized in very different ways.
Yeah.
That matter, because again, if you want to get to the essence of the reproduction, and where to interrupt and how to interrupt, it's really valuable to understand that. But I'm working on the next episode of my podcast, and so what I'm trying to work through is this whole notion that there's this book I really love this book early on in my teaching career, and it's called Learning to Be White by Thandeka. And the line in it that just, captures me says the first victim of white racism is the white child.
Yes.
And I just thought, that's so profound, because one of the challenges that I have all the time, and I'm sure you do, in teaching students about this, is sometimes students are either way over here where they just think white supremacy is not the right word, or, the whole collection of white supremacist practices aren't the way to talk about it because it sounds too offensive or too Ku Klux Klan or whatever. But then all the way over here is the other group of students who think that they are inherently, that white supremacy is inherently about the badness of white people. And I'm like, okay, so this is it's a little bit more complex than that, and you can make efforts to undo yourself from being blindly engulfed by whiteness ideology. And so I think let's talk a little bit about that, because I think this concept that you learn, you're not born with it, you learn it and how to operate within it.
And let us be clear. There are gradations of whiteness. There are levels of whiteness. Okay. All right. There is a reason why the Germans, the Jews, the Italians, the French, the Greeks, the Romanians, so forth, and the Scandinavians, when they come to America, become white. Okay. All right. Before they come to America, they're not white. Okay. All right. What is it about whiteness that people want to embrace? Okay. And let's talk about this for a couple of minutes here. First of all, think about something. How many Catholics have become president of the United States? Ku Klux Klan, white supremacist terrorist group, used to say no ends and no Catholics. Okay. All right. Okay. There's a reason why there's only one Catholic ever elected as president of the United States. That was John F. Kennedy. There's a reason why you only have two Irish. Okay. All right. There's a reason why you have no Italian, no Slavs, no Poles, no Greeks. And by the way, you can go on down the list of lesser whites. Okay. Right. All right. There's an interesting photo where you have an Irish person juxtaposed with an African person that was, by the way, on the New Yorker in the 1800s. Okay. And they're on a scale. All right. And they're equal. Okay. They're both considered to be animals. Right. The Irish became this interesting book. It's how the Irish became white. Okay. They became white to avoid being treated as if they were a person of color. Right. Okay. All right. And you've got a lot of other immigrants, okay, even African immigrants that do not want to align themselves with African Americans for fear of being treated as if they were Black. Right. Okay. All right, until it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the police shows up and all of a sudden you get, you Black. Okay. Right. All right. So part of this, that's why I say when we talk about white supremacy, as again, the FBI indicated, we're talking about white terrorism. Okay. And everybody is not a terrorist. Okay. All right. But to participate in a system, to benefit from a system. Okay. All right. And what is this benefit? All right. I'm sorry. I got a 21-year-old son. All right. I just had to have my conversation with my 21-year-old son about how he's going to respond when he gets stopped by the police. Right. Okay. All right. I got white colleagues. They don't have to have that conversation. No. Okay. All right. They don't have to worry about it. But I was just in a store, by the way, with mask. Okay. I'm being followed around the store. Okay. By security guards. I'm a college professor. I've got a master's, 2 PhDs, and a bachelor's, full professor at Miami University. Okay. I'm being followed around. All right. Why are Blacks being shot by police? Because there's a presumption of guilt. Okay. Brianna, we just got $12 million. Brianna, family got $12 million. We think about something. The police had a no-knock rule. They didn't have to knock. Okay. They suspect there's a criminal in here. Knock down the door, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm in class today. I ask my students, white students, 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody knocks your door down. What's your response going to be? Okay. All right. They said, it's on. I said, exactly. Okay. All right. They knocked down the door. By the way, this reminds me of Fred Hampton and Black Panthers when police knocked down the door in places like Chicago, okay, and LA and San Francisco and Oakland, okay, and were murdered by police officers, okay. In the Hampton suite, over 100 shots were fired, okay. 99 of these 100 shots were from police guns, only one from Fred Hampton, okay? Now think about something. You're in your room, okay? All right? We live in a country that says you have a right to own and bear arms, okay? One last thing. But you've got a 12-year-old kid in upstate Ohio with a plastic gun, okay, who a police officer felt threatened enough that he blew him away. Okay, that's white privilege. Okay, and that's white supremacy. That's why we've got to dismantle it.
Yeah, it's killing us in various different ways. I would argue, and I think for me, when I'm working with students and sometimes just my neighbor, because sometimes I've been doing this for so long that you know, sometimes you got to retreat, collect yourself, and re-enter the discussion, because quite honestly, sometimes the gap, you know, what people don't know is it's so distorting to the potential conversation, you know, that it just becomes overwhelming sometimes, especially in sound bites, when you only have a little bit of time for this and a little bit of time for that. But I really want people to understand that this is bad for all of us. You know, it's not good for any of us. And even white elites, so to speak, you know, have to do, you know, really, you know, what do they have to do to hang on to? I mean, what kind of complex does it engender in them to have to try to, you know, maintain this superiority in the face of, you know, problematizing the narrative of justice, equality, and freedom for all.
But see, here's the problem. They don't have to deal with it because, one, we've institutionalized this, we've internalized this within multiple systems, multiple institutions. We call it systemic racism, People are pointing finger at police right now, I published a paper a couple of weeks ago. Police are not the problem, Police are doing exactly what we are hiring them to do, keeping a lid on these problems, All right. The problem is a system that targets Blacks from the cradle to the grave. And it has a name, by the way. It's called the cradle to prison pipeline. So let's look at this. We'll just go to the 60s just for a brief period of time. 1960s, a very strange thing happened. Black folks, white folks, Native American folks, a whole bunch of folks got upset and actually felt that they could change the system. Let's go back a generation. Coming out of World War II, the United States going into the Cold War was so afraid of another group of whites, from Russia, that they started pumping money into education because we did not want the Russians to beat us in technology, so forth. So, Lord forbid, beat us to the moon. Guess what we did? All right. We pumped money into education, the Black schools and the white schools, The focus of the civil rights movement was to open up the schools, so that our kids could be educated, all right? What happened? We produced the best educated population this country had ever seen up to that point. And they honestly believed that they could change the narrative. White, working with Blacks, working with GBLTQ, working with Native Americans, working with elderly, working with women, working with poor people, All right, all of these movements that coalesced and came together to transform this nation. And guess what? We elected a law and order president, All right. And they began, by the way, taking the money out of education and putting it into the prison industrial complex. All right. So, and I asked myself, so now after 40 years of that, of criminalizing people for being colored, all right, think about opiates, If I'm living in the suburbs, and I'm doing opiates, because, I've gotten addicted to them because they're pain pills, and so forth and so on. They tell me that if I'm a white middle-class female addicted to opiates, then I've got a psychological addiction problem, That's that same person, a Black female, also dealing with pain, all right, in the urban centers for the last 30, 40 years has been criminalized, her children, her husband, so forth and so on, all right, for taking the same drug, the same drugs, Last thing, cradle to prison pipeline, taking the money out of schools, particularly, we live in the state of Ohio. State of Ohio Supreme Court has ruled 4 separate occasions that the way we fund education is patently unconstitutional. We spend more money in our rich white suburbs than we do in our poor white suburbs or in our poor urban schools. All right. So what does that translate into being? We're locking up more and more. This is a strange dynamic. You got to appreciate that. Okay, so we're arresting all these black folks on drugs, right?
Mhm.
Where are we putting the prisons?
Right.
We're not putting them in the urban areas,
No, we're putting them out in the rural areas.
in the rural white areas.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see. I'm buying off poor whites
Right.
with jobs in the
Right.
prison industrial
Right.
complex,
Right.
and I'm filling those jail cells with urban blacks.
Right.
Okay, and wonder why there's a tension between these two populations. Okay, poor whites have been pitted against poor blacks since all the way back. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, all the way back to, again, the Irish and the Italians and all these other poor whites are being pitted against
Mm-hmm.
poor blacks, and they're told, hey, be white and we'll give you a job patrolling these poor blacks, okay, and keeping them in their place.
Right.
All right, the last thing, isn't it strange? I ask my students and I ask anybody else, how much does it cost to go to Miami University? A year, okay? You're doing about $30,000, maybe $40,000 max. How much does it cost to lock somebody up in jail for a year? You're dealing with $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000, and by the way, that's minimum security. Okay, all right. You go to maximum security, you up to $80,000 to $90,000. So we could send these black folks to, and Native Americans and Hispanics to, a place like Miami University and save money.
Right. Right. We could actually invest in rehabilitation, which
Hello.
is supposed to be.
Well, not only that, but as the Children Defense Fund says, it is easier to train and educate a child than it is to rehabilitate an adult.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And by the way, every dollar we spend on education, we get $10 back.
Right.
In taxes and save lives, so forth and so on, particularly taxes. Okay, back to this elite individual, you know, that is not thinking about this from a race issue. Then good. Let's not talk about race. Let's talk about practical resource allocation and maximization. How do we, as a community, okay? And that's the other thing. White supremacy have us talking about white folks and black folks and red folks and yellow folks, okay, and GPLT folks and so forth and so on. Why not as members of the community?
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this also, it goes to I think wrestling with, you know, is so ingrained in our language and our thinking. Like I'm thinking about Barbara Field's racecraft.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we continue to recreate it, even when we're trying to, you know, dismantle it, because it is so very ingrained in our thinking, and we really do have to challenge ourselves to try to get outside of those contexts.
Okay.
So,
and then we have an incident, and some of our liberal colleagues will say, "How did that happen? What? I didn't know."
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then we get into this strange moment. Well, we don't really want to talk about these issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Let's be polite. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's not have any more difficult conversations, okay? Because it traumatizes me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Damn, I'm the one that's getting shot at.
I done been shot at. Yeah, I know. Right. I think this reminds me of when I used to work in TV news, and a lot happened in the years that I worked in TV news. Mm-hmm. Rodney King, and I had just moved. I had just left LA. For working for CBS. I thought I was going to BET. That was my dream job, but the stock went public right when they hired me. So I ended up working for an ABC affiliate. And so Rodney King happened, Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, the ending of O.J. Simpson trial, the Michael Jackson stuff, a lot of stuff happened when I was in the newsroom. And I remember when the Rodney King thing, when the beating actually happened, and the video came out, and I remember talking to the lead anchor in the station, and he was saying to me, he was like, well, Denise, it looks like, you know, I'm trying to understand this because I feel like the white folks are more outraged by this than the Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, that's not the way I would read it.
Yeah.
I would say everybody is outraged, but the Black people are not shocked, you know, because we've seen it before, and we've seen it again and again and again. But I think what was astounding about, you know, what's always re-astounding, if there could be such a thing, that's what it feels like every time, where you're like, surely this time we've got it on video. And yet, you know, it doesn't, the verdict isn't what we expect it to be. And so I think that really goes to, you know, thinking about how difficult it is. And I always say we see the world differently because we experience the world differently, and we're in the world differently. And that makes these conversations that much more difficult, especially these days, because I feel like we're less willing to listen to each other as we try to take sides and get a point out, rather than really try to deeply listen and you know, connect the dots
Right.
between.
Can you hear me?
Different things. You're second.
Okay. I've lost my video feed, but okay.
Well, we can see you and we can hear you.
Okay, good. But see, here's the thing. Until we recognize the cost of racism,
Yeah.
okay,
and
what is doing to us as a society,
yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing. Interesting. My grandmother used to say, in order to keep somebody down, you got to stay down with them.
Right.
Okay. Think about something. Where are the poorest regions of this country?
Yes, in the rural areas.
In rural areas, but also the South.
Yes.
Okay.
In the South.
All right.
Yes.
By the way, if you look at slavery did not benefit the South.
No.
Okay.
No.
It benefited the Midwest, the North, and by the way, European purchasers like in London. Okay. Yeah. The plantation owners did not benefit. They didn't make money on slavery. Okay. All right. It's much like the lottery. Okay. It gives people the illusion that you can win. And the slave owners kept saying, you know, if I pump enough in here, I get enough slaves. And diverse labor pools work harder that are free than a monolithic labor pool that's only working on one crop. Okay. All right. And you say, wow, well, that didn't work out for us. Okay. Colonialism didn't work in Africa and in India and so forth and so on. They were losing money. Okay. All right. So the question becomes, why did people keep embracing it?
Yes.
It's like the lottery.
Yes.
You're hooked on it. I keep putting money in that slot machine. Eventually, it's going to hit. Yes. Racism is like that gambling casino.
Yeah. I actually think that I want to talk about that for a minute, because we had a short conversation about a year or so ago about racism as a kind of addiction. So I want to swing back to that, but it's two things I want to say that connect to what you were saying. One is thinking about, it reminds me of Carolyn Anderson's White Rage, which again, I thought was, you know, there's a quote in there that I just love, and I don't have it at my fingertips, and there's no way that I can cite it exactly, but it's basically talking about the way in which, and even Du Bois digs this up in Black Reconstruction, where he's saying, you know, that this story, this narrative, this sense of whiteness as, you know, a kind of property, a kind of, you know, ownership, is privilege, is power, is protection, you know, is property. And that is so powerful that our poor white citizens continue to choose it over really their own well-being, and the choice for a better, making a better, more equitable world. And that's just really interesting to me, because there are many points throughout our history where we could have done something different. We could have done something different during Reconstruction, and we didn't.
Several points, yes.
We could have not backlashed after the civil rights, but we did, and on and on and on, and into the current moment. And
by the way, we could have advanced after Obama, as opposed to spending the last 4 years, he's going to say political statement, last 4 years trying to derail every program that came into being, okay? From universal health care, okay, all right, from decriminalizing a whole range of offenses, okay, particularly drug offenses, by the way, releasing populations from prisons, by the way, that are costing us billions of dollars, okay, all right, for only reason why they're there are for drug charges, okay? When we look, you got an addiction, if you're in Europe, good, declare yourself a drug addict, you go to your doctor, and with your insurance, they will give you drugs while they wean you off from this. And by the way, you keep working.
Right, exactly.
Okay? All right, you keep working.
Very different approach. So
yeah.
So that brings us to our first question in the chat. This is right up that alley. Dana is suggesting that could it be that Trump and Trumpism be viewed as a last gap potentially of a white supremacist culture that senses its doom due to the changing demographics of the country?
Okay, let's be honest about it. Okay, what is and I'm not gonna make this a political thing, but let's say that the mood of white America for the last about 10 years has been one of fear. Okay, that projections have been, at least for the last 10 years, that we're going to get to 2050, and America is going to be, for the first time, it's going to be majority people of color. Okay, by the way, fueling the anti-abortion movement. Okay, this is not something that started in the Black community. This is something that started in conservative white communities. Okay, and by the way, when Roe v. Wade first hit, there was no uproar by these conservative Christians like there is now, okay? What is the issue? The issue is the declining white population, all right, and wanting to punish white women, all right, because they're not going to go into the Black community and say, we don't want you all to have abortions. Why do we know this? Because eugenics came into being in this country to sterilize Black women to keep them from having babies, okay? So this is just the opposite, all right? So this gets into what one author calls white fragility, okay? And fear that the system that they know, we got to make America great again, okay? We got to make America white again, okay? And we have to reaffirm whiteness, okay? And if you look, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and white terrorist organization has been directly associated with not Trump, okay, but this whole demographic shift in this country.
Yeah, and to me, I'm always thinking about the ways in which we leverage Black bodies to do this work, which is, is profoundly disturbing. But just like the whole anti-abortion conversation is, I don't know if you remember the billboard in Soho with the Black woman. There was a Black child on the billboard, and the caption was something like, the most dangerous place a Black child could be is in the mother's.
By the way, it's interesting the timing of that, okay? Because no one was concerned about that from the 1920s up through at least the 1960s. Okay, where Black women were places like Mississippi were going in and having what they called the Mississippi appendectomy. Okay, going in and supposedly having their appendix taken out, and they wind up sterilized. Okay, the conversations were not being had when we are experimenting with syphilis and Black prison inmate population. Okay, by the way, people are saying all lives matter right now. Well, damn it, Why weren't we saying all lives matter when we were lynching thousands of black folks, okay? Why weren't we saying all lives matter, by the way, when slavery? Why weren't we saying all lives matter when Breonna Taylor and Floyd, okay, are being killed, okay? Yes, all lives matter, okay? And it starts, by the way, with all lives. So let's be concerned about these that are dying indiscriminately. Oh, yes, okay? And when you kick a kid out of school, you're giving them a life sentence. You're actually declaring them dead on arrival, okay? All right, let's talk about them, okay?
Right.
Let's talk about the killing. By the way, one author talks about it in terms of soul murders, okay? All right, and the number of black and brown and red kids whose spirits are being destroyed, okay? All right, and you wonder why they're angry. If you've been in the schools, you see a lot of angry kids, okay? All right, why is that? Okay, they're angry because we're telling them, on one hand, you can do whatever you want, and reality, they're simply saying, but I can't.
Right. That's yeah, I don't know. I just think it's really, really profoundly disturbing and really frustrating as well when it's hard to really communicate to people what's actually going on. So it was interesting because I was reading an article yesterday. I can't even remember if you sent it. You always sending something, Rodney. So I don't know if it's one you sent or one that came in my inbox. But it was this article was about how they were talking about how the university is overrun with far leftist professors.
Oh.
And and we're,
I'm wondering what universities they're at, but
Yeah, right. We're destroying the world because we're so far left. And what the article actually determines is that most professors are centrist. They're not
centrist.
Too far here or too far there. But we do have some who are on the far right and some who are on the far left. And there happen to be more on the far left than on the far right, but the overwhelming majority of us are, in centrist. But as they were going through the article, the thing that struck me is, so they would make statements like, it typically people who are, in the university lean a little bit, they consider themselves a little bit liberal. We don't, usually this is true of highly educated people in most professions, not just the university. But they kept talking about it as if they had no explanation of why this was the case, which was shocking to me because my thing was like, okay, what do highly educated people do that makes them invest in equity? To me, any call for equity seems like you're a liberal.
By the way, I just did a very search. If you do a search on ideology and education, you find out that the more education an individual has, the more likely they will be liberal. Progressive, okay? The less education, the more likely they'll be conservative. So it's not that colleges are liberal bastions of whatever. Is that education frees the mind. Liberal means free, okay? It means progressive. It means trying to push the boundaries, okay? Conservative literally means trying to keep things the way they are. Okay, all right. It's a more rigid construction. Okay, and so yeah, I mean, and when you add gender, when you add race to education, then the level of liberalness increases. Okay, but if you add again, and this is why certain politicians will appeal to anti-intellectualism, will appeal to a racial base, okay, will vilify others, okay, who are protesting the system or such. I mean, think about something. Here you have a football player whose career has been ended, Colin Kaepernick, Okay, for doing what? Okay, for protesting. What is he doing? By the way, it didn't affect his job. Okay, all right. He chose to kneel on singing when they were singing the national anthem. Okay. By the way, he says that had nothing to do with him throwing a football. Okay.
Right.
Yet, because he chose to stand out and kneel, all right, he's told that he cannot play football. Okay. All right. And it raises the issue. You raised it a couple of minutes ago. I want in terms of cultural tax. Okay. People of color are the ones that are in the trenches trying to change a system that they did not create. Okay. All right. Throughout our history where there's been change. Okay. It was white women. I want to talk about allies for a couple minutes. We're going to talk about supremacy for a minute. I want to talk about white allies for a minute. Okay. It was white women, okay, who allowed slaves to be in their basements and such, that quilted quilts, okay, up and down the Freedom Highway, okay, Underground Railroad, okay. It was white suffragettes, okay, who worked in the abolitionist movement, okay, to end slavery, who, by the way, set aside their call for the right to vote, okay, and start pushing for the end of slavery. And white women were saying because they felt that it was an even more abhorrent sin. Okay. All right. And when we look at any of the movements, the Harlem Renaissance, we look at the 1920s, we look at what's coming up in World War I, World War II with W.B. Du Bois, but also Civil Rights Movement, we see allyships coming into being, okay, to facilitate these processes, okay, that we are stronger together than we are, okay, and part of white supremacy is to chastise white allies, okay, and try to make them feel guilty. Well, you know what? All you are is and they used to say in lover, okay. It's more subtle today, okay. Where white allies say, you know what? More cops are dying right now. It's in press today, okay. You know what? These are just terrorists, okay. You know what? They're shutting down our shops, so forth and so on. These black radicals out there. By the way, same message goes all the way back to slavery.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I mean, obviously, and maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but there's been no radical change for social justice in this country, and I would imagine anywhere in the world, that hasn't been, brought on by social movement building.
Yeah.
And there's been no really successful social movement building without coalitions, with diverse coalitions of people. I always say, I think that's the real revolution: a multicultural, gender balanced, sexually interesting
rainbow coalition with Jesse Jackson called
it. So I think that I think that's true. But I want to play devil's advocate a little bit around the whole allyship thing. So we can go back, I looking at the abolitionist movement is one of the first movements beyond the founding of the country. And, that
and before that, by the way, the Quakers.
Yeah. And that's because we joined forces with white people.
Right.
When Black abolitionists were fighting against, fighting for abolitionism, they were also fighting against Indian removal, and they were doing that in coalition with white abolitionists. So it's always been coalition, and I think that's really important. But I think there's something else happening today that I find disturbing, because I feel like it reinvents something that's at the core of the problem. And so that's the way in which we're not, so for me, I don't want you to be, ally might not, for me, I might have be past that word, because for me, I don't want you to be in this fight because you need to help poor little me. I want you to be in this fight because we got to make a better world. and it's better for what we're trying to make will be better for you, better for me, and better for everybody else around it. And so, you know, I don't. So to me, it's that little rub of where it falls and slips into a kind of missionary kind of, you know, or performative kind of thing. You know, the performative piece is really interesting because this is all about the internet and the power of our ability to participate and build rhetorical communities outside of the surveillance of the state. But, you know, my daughter is like an avid TikToker at 12. But, you know, every day she's participating in some kind of protest online, you know, for Black Lives Matter, against, you know, all other kinds of isms. And so it's interesting to me, some of the conversations that I have with her and some of the things that she showed me and some of the ways that they're leveraging the internet. And so I want to look at that and say, you know, you guys do your thing your way. That's awesome. But another part of me is like, I don't know how that lands with, you know, what's the real commitment that sort of moves us forward? And do you, my white friends, see it like, you know, I'm in this fight for my life, for the life of my children and my peers and my colleagues and my, not just to help somebody else and not just for myself, right?
Right. By the way, first of all, I had somebody on social media. They saw me in my Black Lives Matter T-shirt. I was in class, and I took a picture, and they said, "Ooh, I wonder, what do you think about me getting a Black Lives Matter T-shirt?" Okay, and I said, "It all depends upon why you're going to get it." Okay, is this for performance? Is this for show? Okay, or is this do you have a history of a dedicated life in this struggle? Okay, and what you said, I really want to highlight that. Okay, you're not doing this for Black folks,
right? Yeah.
Okay, all right. Trust me, I don't need anybody else to come save me, help me, so forth and so on. Okay, no, okay, no. I need somebody who's going to go to battle, okay, with me. Okay, are going to be in the trenches as we get shot at, so forth and so on. Okay, I don't need somebody who gets dressed up, okay, or go on social media, and click the button, saying that I'm angry. Okay, I just click my angry button on Facebook to let you know that I'm down with the cause, so forth and so on. Okay, no, that kind of performance mess. Okay, and if I wasn't on this, I got a couple other words, but it's mess. Okay, it's not real. Okay, there's a phrase that says, if you don't have any skin in the game, then you're not in the game. Okay, all right. And what does skin in the game mean? Okay, what do you have to lose in terms of this? Okay, when you look at white allies in the past, all right, these women were facing ostracism. They were facing being kicked out of their community. Okay, they were facing losing jobs, so forth and so on. But there was another group of allies, which is interesting. You remember seeing The Help?
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, The Help, these white women did not care anything about integration. Okay, all right, they cared about making sure that the kitchen got clean, that the meals got fixed, and that the beds were made and clothes were done, so forth and so on. So during the bus boycotts, they went and picked up their help. Okay, not because they want to help out the struggle, okay, but they want to help themselves. Okay, to me, that's a more honest reality. Okay, that in order for me to get my work done, okay, then I got to make sure that you are in a position where you are able to get to do the work. Okay, all right. That means that my interests are tied to your interests, and as I tell folks, you don't need to like me. Okay, All
Right.
right. I don't give a damn about you liking another black person
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I want you to act, as they said, as Hobbes said, in your own selfish best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's in your interest. By the way, as a group of Kentucky black lung recipients just realized when they cut their insurance programs, they voted for the individual who cut the Obama insurance programs. They said, whoa, wait a minute. We thought that you were going to be cutting those programs for them colored people over there, them welfare programs. We didn't think that you were going to cut our subsidy checks for black lung. Okay. All right. And in COVID now, I understand that there are 1 million people that have been kicked out of insurance programs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of these people are white. They're not black. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That lets you know that regardless of, you don't have to like me, but we do have to work together. Let me give you one more story.
Yeah.
I'm in Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam vet. Okay. We're on guard duty. And they always seem, for whatever reason, I wound up being teamed with this kid. He was from New Orleans, okay? This white kid from New Orleans, whose dad, by the way, was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in New Orleans, okay? We have to watch each other's back, okay? All right? He didn't like black folks. I could care less about the Ku Klux Klan, but guess what? Our lives were dependent upon each other. Okay. All right. When I went to sleep, he was wide awake. Okay. When he went to sleep, I'm wide awake. Okay. And when we got drunk, by the way, he said, you know what, Rod, you black and I'm white and all that. But, when we get back to the States, we might not be friends, but past everything else, I don't want you to date my sister. Okay. I mean, every time he'd get drunk, he'd say that. Our last night in Vietnam, he's getting drunk. He made that statement. And I said, Ralph, let's be honest. I've seen a picture of your sister. She's ugly. You do not have to worry about me trying to date your sister. She's uglier than you are. Okay. And we both laughed. Okay. Yeah. All right. And I raised this because a lot of people think that we got to like each other. No, we don't. Okay. Yeah. I got family members that I don't like. Okay, but we're still family members. Okay, this family that we call United States of America. Okay, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay, this thing that binds us together. Okay, that's all I want. Okay, is for us to act like we are part of the American family.
So there are a couple of things I want to talk about. Let's see. Okay, we still have. I want to talk about this. So the other thing that I think is obvious, and yet there's still so much more to learn about it, is the impact that this whole logic of white supremacy doesn't just, get into white people's heads,
no.
It's into everybody's heads, yeah. Right? Like it's not, nobody is absolved of it. And I would always trouble that statement that black people can't be racist. But when you say it's troubling, I mean, I don't want to slip into, I don't think we're not talking about the same thing. And we're not just talking about prejudice, but let me give you an example. So I was driving I was in Detroit, which is my home and is where I was living at the time. And I was it was, I don't know, like 9 o'clock at night. And I was with Chuck, who was at the time my boyfriend. And we were driving down the street, and Michigan is one of those states where you got to do a Michigan left.
Right.
It's been that way. We call it a Michigan left, but basically you got to turn around, a go round.
Right.
So
which, by the way, drives me crazy every time I come to one of those.
Yeah, I know. So we were driving. We were trying to we were going to a grocery store. So I live in the hood. So we, at that hour, there were no grocery stores open. You find plenty of party stores. So we had to basically drive across 8 Mile Road into Southfield to find a grocery store. And we pulled up in the lot of a grocery store that we thought was open, but that grocery store was closed.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a cop car in front of us. The
Mm-hmm.
cop he makes an illegal turn to get behind us, and basically pulls us over in this, stops us in this parking lot and says he's stopping us because of tinted windows. Mm-hmm. And he makes Chuck get out the car, and he makes me get out the car. He's like searching through the car. He puts Chuck in handcuffs and makes mm-hmm. Chuck sit in the back of the police car. No mm-hmm. reason. For tinted windows, this is a little much. Mm-hmm. And in fact, he doesn't even say it was tinted windows in the beginning of this encounter. Mm-hmm. And so Chuck is standing there in handcuffs, and he's like, man, you know why you stopped me. And the cop says, man, don't even go there. And his partner, she was a woman, you could tell she's feeling kind of nervous, like about about the encounter. And so, obviously he puts Chuck in the back of the police car. He goes all through the car. He doesn't find anything. It's nothing there. So he lets him go. And we go on. He gives us a ticket for tinted mm-hmm. windows. That's when he tells us it's tinted windows. So mm-hmm. he gives us a ticket for tinted windows, and we go on our merry way. Right. Now, the cop was black. Yeah. And the woman was, the female cop was white. Mm-hmm. And so I always say to people, like, racism it's about being able to assert power. That's the system. Right. Assert power generally or liminally. Mm-hmm. That just so happened to be in a liminal situation, but he definitely very much had the power to affect our lives mm-hmm. In adverse ways in that moment. And so I think mm-hmm. that's really important, because even when we talk about, all the stuff that's going on with police right now, and really understanding what the call for instance, defunding the police is actually about, and really confronting, first of all, the history of policing right. in this country, the history of policing in Black and Brown mm-hmm. communities, and the new ways in which is working now alongside, or I shouldn't say new again, let's mm-hmm. say that, with gentrification, for instance, mm-hmm. That, to serve and protect has meant to, discipline Black bodies to serve right. and protect white interests. And I think that is so clearly laid out, and so clearly, I think, documented, and that we really have to, when we talk about the ways in which this manifests itself, it comes out in many different ways. In fact, one of my favorite sociologists, outside of you, Rodney, is Dylan Rodriguez. Yeah. And he talks about multiculturalist white supremacy. Mm-hmm. Just many different faces. And it's, right. It's systemic, it's logic, mm-hmm. it moves institutionally, mm-hmm. it manifests, sometimes in individual ways, consciously mm-hmm. and unconsciously or disconsciously. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's when we think about disrupting it or ending it, we have to have many fronts in this struggle. There's no one straight line ahead. And so on that note, I know you just did a series on decolonizing the university. So can you talk a little bit about the ways you see this manifesting itself in the university, and then some very concrete things we can do to move in the other direction?
Let me segue into that. First of all, I'm the son of a cop. My brother's a state trooper in Illinois. My dad was a cop in one of the most vicious cities in this country. I know East St. Louis and Detroit go arm in arm on where's the most violent. Okay, But Harvard did a recent study on police officers, and it argued that, you know what, having more black cops will not change the system. It's a systemic racism is what we're talking about. Okay, and so when you have a black cop, he is doing doubly hard in some cases to impress his colleagues, white colleagues, that see, I am part of this big blue line. Okay, and they will work even harder to enforce the systemic racism. Okay, institutions of higher education, and in getting at these, recognizing that these institutions are linked. Okay, education is part of a systemic process. Okay, institutional set of processes that work in tandem. Okay, the police and the schools and the economy and our political systems, okay, and all work in tandem with each other. Okay, and unless we understand that, then we're not going to be able to unravel this process. Okay, as Fry says, you know what, it's much like looking at a bird cage. Okay, and sometimes people want to pick at this one little wire over here and this little wire over here and not realizing we're dealing with a whole structure. Okay, all right, so decolonization, recognizing we're dealing with a system sequence of institutions that are working collaboratively together. Okay, that if you want to impact upon these black kids that are being killed by cops, it doesn't start on the street corner. It starts in the classroom. Okay, all right, and if you fix what's happening in the classroom, then what's happening on the street will also get fixed. Okay, it's not the other way around. All right, we've been trying to fix the output, the outcome of dysfunctional educational systems. Okay, all right, and the college is just at the apex of this entire dysfunctional system, by the way, that was set up to guarantee that certain people fail. Okay, decolonization understands that there's a reason why institutions have used IQ tests, and after that SAT test and ACT test scores. Okay, they don't test whether or not you can be successful in school. They test the quality of the schools that you came from, and so therefore they reify the racist economic structures, all right, that feed into them. Okay, and it gives the institutions the illusion of being equitable, equality, because what it's saying is, well, look, you know, we're using this fair measure. Okay, and we know it isn't. Okay, so decolonizing understands, first of all, we have to change how kids get into an institution. Okay, all right, and by the way, that means recognizing that we cannot wait till kids get to high school and graduate from high school, all right, to start recruiting them. All right, we need to be on their radar at the 6th and 5th and 4th grade. Okay, by the way, middle class and affluent people, families are getting their kids ready to go to elite institutions all the way from the cradle up through, okay, high school. Okay, all right, well, an equitable system, educational system, recognizes that institutions need to also be concerned about that. Also recognizes that, you know what, I'm sorry, classics, great thinkers, philosophers, great scientists, great musicians, you name it. In every field of human endeavor that colleges deal with, we got dead white men. Okay, I got no offense against Plato and Aristotle and Kierkegaard and so forth and so on, but excuse me, there was an Asante, there was a and one of my Hampton, there were Angela Davis. These are great philosophers, so forth. By the way, B.B. King's a great musician. Okay, he's a classical musician. Okay, what this means is that, and by the way, and we want to have this conversation about diversity over here in this little course over here called diversity. Okay, all right. Okay, and we want to have a diversity intercultural perspectives course at a place like Miami. So you take this one course, all right, and you've now got this vaccine, okay, and you've now insulated against the germ of racism. One course, okay. Your other units of study, Okay, all these courses for 4 years of college, all right, where you rarely talk about people of color, okay, except to problematize them. Okay, you never talk about Black women as being great doctors or lawyers or physicists or chemists or engineers or coming up with great ideas. You never talk about Asians, okay, who females again, who might have come up with a new calculus procedure, so forth and so on. Okay, all right. The only time we want to talk about people of color is over in this little space over here. By the way, if you are a person of color at a place like Miami University as a student, okay, all right, you're the only one or maybe two students in this classroom, okay, all right, and every damn class you go to, your teachers are trying to make sure we want to be inclusive. So I'm going to call my one more Black student, okay, all right. So this Black student get calls upon 3-4 times a day, okay. His white colleagues don't. By the way, if I'm absent, you know I'm not there. Okay, I don't even have to check the road and know, you know what, Black folks ain't here today. Okay, all right. The message I'm sending to students, white students and Black students, is that diversity is only important over here. In this less than 1% of 1%. This 99 other percent is not. Oh, by the way, we're going to have some Black events. And then we're going to have some GPLT events. And then we're going to have some women's events. Oh, yeah, we're going to have we'll have Green Beer Day because we don't want the Irish to feel left out. Okay. All right. Then we're going to have Hispanic Week. Okay. And then we're going to have, okay. By the way, we compartmentalize these conversations about diversity.
Right.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, if a party ain't associated with it, then it's not really important. One, two, because we give the message of what's important. It's embedded in all of our courses. Okay. Decolonization means what? Let me see if I get this straight. Writing is important. So we make writing across the discipline. Critical thinking is important, so we wanted to cross the discipline. Analytical methods and dealing with data is important, so we want to have this across, okay? We think that logic is important, that you think logic. We think research is important, so wow, we say that diversity is important, and we want you to take this one class.
Right.
Okay, all right. Decolonization talks about where we put Black scholars. Okay, we hire Black scholars and scholars of color to teach our diverse courses. Okay, all right, and then we wonder why at a predominantly white institution. Okay, all right, I'm in class and I got students shooting daggers at me. Okay, I don't want to have this conversation. Okay, and why are you forcing me to have this conversation? Okay, and surely it's not that difficult. Why are you grading me so harshly? Okay, these ideas are not that important. If they were important, I'd have it over here. I wouldn't be in this diverse course taking it from this diverse faculty person. Okay, all right. If it was really important, okay, and then when faculty of color get these lower evaluations, okay, then we say, oh, you know what, you're not as good a teacher as John Boy over here, by the way, who's teaching a required course called theory, okay, that primarily deals with white male thinking, okay, and we've reified him, and students don't like him either, but they don't challenge him because he's sitting in a gatekeeping central course. And the message is, you got to know this. You got to do well here. Over here, this is just, we created this for the colored people because, that's the only thing they can talk about is issues of diversity and color, And by the way, we'll leave them over there. As long as they teach that one course, we're happy. Okay. All right. By the way, again, at Miami, everybody, okay, think about something. If you're teaching a math course, I'd expect for you to have background in math. If you're teaching history, I'd expect for you to have a background in history.
Yeah.
Yet everybody wants to teach diversity with no background, no training, no research, so forth and so on. And then we wonder why our students, okay, anyway, it gets at that and it recognizes that. I want to end with this because there's 12 points to this. I'm not going to cover it all, but this cultural tax. Okay, where individuals of color, particularly Black at predominantly white institutions, have to carry this weight of trying to transform the institution. This goes from students to staff to faculty. Okay, all right, where they're looked upon to change the system. Look at us right now, okay, because a former professor in education says monkeys, all right, all right, all of a sudden we discover we've got a race problem, okay, all right, and everybody's upset, okay, and we've got to make sure that we deal with, okay, by the way, I've been in 32 years, all right, this is not the first nor it will be the last white person who gets upset and decides to target people of color, okay.
Right.
All right. And all this programming does not transform the institution unless we want to transform the institution. Okay. That means structurally. Okay. It's not more programs, it's more people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
At all levels of this institution from, okay. Last one, I'll leave you, I'll move on with this. Okay. If you have a whole body of people at your institution in a whole category and they're all white, you have a problem, okay? When 99% of your administrative assistants at your institution are white females, okay, and you can't find a black female, that should let you know that you got a problem. Okay, when the majority of your black people are teaching diversity courses and few of them are in your theory courses or in your methods courses or in your stat courses, okay, or in your frontline courses, you have a problem. Okay, when the majority of your diversity experts at your institution charged with diversity are people of color, and you cannot find a white person in that whole chain of command, guess what? You have marginalized, you've said basically that this problem is their problem and we want them to fix it.
Yeah, I think all of those are just really, really important points, especially at this moment for us as we try to figure this out on campus yet again. And, I do believe that, even when it feels like we're going backwards, that we are actually, the obstacles are sometimes redirecting us and giving us time to reflect, so that we are ultimately, in a very evolutionary way, moving forward, although it seems painfully slow at times. So I think all of this is really important because, again, I will just really emphasize what I emphasize, especially when in the teachers that I teach. They'll come into the race course or the multicultural education course, and they want to do better.
Yeah.
They want to know how to engage with their students. They want to know how to help the students, achieve, equitably, and they come in and they want these methods so they can fix the problem.
Tell me what I need to do to be saved.
Yes,
the one thing I need to do. Okay?
Right, exactly. And what I try to encourage them to think about is like, okay, I could give you some methods, but these methods aren't gonna really help you if you don't engage, if you don't deal with you. And this starts with raising your own consciousness.
Hello.
Educating yourself. I think that is extremely, extremely important. And the other really important thing, because this is institutional, but bad institutions rest on opaque cells.
Yes.
So I think, these two things go hand in hand. And we have to always say any revolution worth its weight will have multiple fronts, right? You don't ever just attack straight ahead.
And let me argue that every revolution starts with myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. And I recognize, by the way, I am not a saint. Okay. I've taken the Harvard implicit bias test. Okay. And yeah, I've had to come to grips with some of my implicit biases. Okay. We grew up in a racist, homophobic, sexist system. Yes. Okay. We've by the way, the word is internalized this. Okay. Right. Which means that we all have work to do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Back in the church, you said we've all sinned and fallen short of. Well, guess what? We're all racist. We're all sexist. We're all homophobic. We're all ethnocentric. We're all so forth and so on. Okay. That's the reality. Okay. Stanley Milgram discovered something. Okay. In the Milgram experiments, he discovered that the reason why the Nazis were successful is that nobody was willing to challenge authority. Okay. All right. We must challenge ourselves and challenge authority to transform this structure. Okay.
Yes. And there's nothing better we can do for students than be an example of that challenge. So I think like one of my favorite quotes of all time, I have many of them, but this is at the top of my list most of the time, is that education will transform the world, but self-education will transform education.
Hello.
And so that I think is that's how you get started. I think sometimes the issues are so complex, they feel so big, you're just paralyzed by the whole thought of where to begin. And here is where to begin is, taking the opportunity to, expand our thinking, to learn the history, to move between different histories, to look. I mean, I always say, I feel like the knowledge is really relational. It's between different disciplines. It's between different interpretations. It's between, it doesn't rest. It moves. And the other thing that's really important is that you can't go and just do this by yourself, because some of the hardest questions you will have to ask of yourself will come to you because you're rubbing up against difference.
Right.
And so that I think is hugely important. So we are out of time.
Oh,
I know. This was a great conversation. We must have been doing a really good job because we didn't get a lot of questions.
Hey, your students and my students,
Yeah, so they know, right? So they know. And so, we just, thank you all for joining us this evening. This recording will be posted on EHS's diversity webpage, probably within the next couple of days. I'll have to do a little bit of editing because I forgot to turn it on until the first question. I forgot to turn the introduction part on. But I think I could smooth that over. And join us in 2 weeks. We are talking about anti-Blackness is the other side of white supremacy, which is right now everybody's talking about it. I don't think everybody understands it. So we're going to tackle that one next week with Dr. Nathaniel Bryant, who I know is in on this conversation with us right now. So thank you. I hope you all have a good rest of the week. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks. And please invite friends and invite other people to chime in to the conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Denise. Dr. D.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodney. It was awesome. I don't think we've ever had a chance to sit down and talk this long.
Yeah.
So after a long time, because this is my 18th year at Miami.
Okay, I got 32.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't touch that.
Yeah, you can. You'll be there, before you know it, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
But, so thank you so much. Okay. And I'll see you. I guess I'll see you at some point. I haven't.
You will.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll COVID, we actually supposed to be coming back next week. So,
Okay.
All right.
All right.
I'm out of here.
Okay.
Bye now.
Yeah.